John Kerry talked about something in Jakarta, and he spoke to the audience. Now, this is our Secretary of State, and he's supposedly really smart, and I'm sure he's a genius. He went to school with my father-in-law. My father-in-law is one of the smartest people I know, period. I don't think I can say the same thing for John Kerry, even if I knew him, because, well, roll it.
When I think about the array of global climate, of global threats, think about this. Terrorism, epidemics, poverty, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, all challenges that know no borders. The reality is that climate change ranks right up there with every single one of them.
Speaking to college students in Jakarta, Indonesia, and making that comment. Now, I don't know, but when you speak to climate change, it's such a fuzzy subject, so I'm going to get into it. Now, when the left speaks to climate change, and anybody on the left would be the mainstream media, oftentimes, it's a reality. The stats are there, and we can go back and you can get the book Bias by Bernie Goldberg, written about 15 years ago, talking about this. It has not changed, but it's overwhelmingly left. They vote Democrat 88 to 96% of the time. Okay, you got it. Some of you maybe wanted a little fact to back it up. I'm just giving it to you. So that's what climate change means when they speak to it. It's man-made climate change, oftentimes because of global warming. Why don't they use global warming anymore, Crane? Because 15 years, temperatures flatlined. Another part of this was, they have this idea that CO2 emissions from those evil energy sources that work, like oil and coal, well, those have been going up, and they got online to say this would increase the temperature. But what happened was they continued to rise, and the temperature flatlined. So, in essence, their theory went right down the river. And why aren't they the man down by the river after coming up with this idea, investing so much into it, demonizing those who disagreed with them on that theory for so long? Why didn't they end up like Chris Farley's character down by the river in a van? Because they had the mainstream media calling people who would expose that theory and challenge it and expose the scandals that were behind it, in the sense of suppressing information, or a stat that said there was consensus of 90% when it was 32% when you looked at overall scientists looking at direct correlation and causation between CO2 rising and temperature rising. I'll tell you what, here's what they did. They went after Jim Inhofe, Senator Jim Inhofe, great senator, senior senator, Oklahoma. He called it the biggest hoax. He was called everything, flat earther, everything else. He turned out to be right. They turned out to be wrong. But why is it that they are allowed to do this? Well, they don't have to be held to account. You see, understand, if you're on the left, you don't get the treatment that we get. That means you may have the facts, you may have it on your side, but guess what? Because of all these things, because we can't defeat you in the discussion that we're having, in the debate that we're having, because you've won your point based on the evidence and substance, well, we're just going to call you an ist or an ism and deflect and say you're mean, and that you like to burn small T's on people's lawns, or you like to dress up like the Black Panthers with their little silly berets, or you're part of that cult of the Westboro Baptist Church holding up signs, and you just hate. That's how they do it. That's how they roll. And it's true. That's what they do. It's not true about us. They have to lie about us. My point is, and I want to highlight it, we have the facts on our side, and when we don't know something, we don't say there's consensus within the scientific community, because science is about proving your hypothesis. You either prove it or you do not. It remains unknown. So they went away from saying global warming, and now they've moved to climate change. This is how it was discussed on the Sunday shows. Here's just a montage of how it was introduced by the hosts of This Week with George Stephanopoulos and Fox News Sunday and Meet the Press and CNN's Candy Crowley. Anyway, you get the idea. Here's how the topic was introduced. You tell me if there's a bias. Roll it.
Governor, a couple of years ago, you made a remark that caught a lot of people's attention. You said that global warming is in God's hands.
You accept that argument. In the past, you've said that you believe that this whole issue of climate change is in God's hands.
In the scientific community, this is not really a debate about whether climate change is real. The consensus is that it is.
Okay, well, hey, it sounds like it is biased. Bob Schieffer and George Stephanopoulos, and that was Meet the Press. Meet the Press had Bill Nye, the science guy. You know, he's not a scientist. No, he's an engineer, a very bright guy, ostensibly. And he debated Marsha Blackburn, Representative Marsha Blackburn. Very smart person. See, I want to say that more and more because every time you hear somebody on the left talk about somebody and they say things that really don't add up to the record, let's look at Paul Krugman. They mentioned the fact that he's a Nobel Prize winner, but you look at his economics and they don't make sense and they've absolutely failed. We'll take a good look at the stimulus a little later. My point is they always talk about how smart people are. Rachel Maddow, check out the intros when Rachel Maddow of MSNBC gets introduced. She is just so smart. She is ripping brilliant. I mean, she is so smart. Every host, and she may be brilliant, misguided as well, off on the information, and quite frankly, wrong. But that said, it's not about Rachel Maddow. It's about the characterization of things. And that's why I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page here. Because when I introduce this topic, we also have to introduce, if there's a game played, I want to tell you what field it's played on. And it's all lined up against anyone who is conservative. That's not conspiratorial. That's reality. So when Bill Nye, the science guy, debates Marsha Blackburn, representative in the House from the great state of Tennessee, the debate may not be fair, as you just heard the setups, and as I've just posted on the Facebook page, as we saw from the newsbusters.org. But here's the question to Marsha Blackburn, and it's fairly interesting. After playing a montage of clips, including Patrick Michaels of the Cato Institute, David Gregory, host, asked, so here was the Guardian newspaper after all the flooding in the UK. Here's the headline. Climate change is here now. It could lead to global conflict, yet politicians squabble. In the scientific community, this is not really a debate about whether climate change is real. The consensus is that it is. The majority of those who believe in the fact that it is caused by humans. There are certainly some in the scientific community who don't believe that it's the case and who are skeptical about some of the conclusions. But nevertheless, there is still a level of consensus. Ooh. My question to begin with both of you this moment, this kind of extreme weather moment, is creating a new urgency. And then he moves and he says to Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn, is there an urgency to act? You've heard the president, drought-stricken California, saying that these weather emergencies, in effect, are creating the conditions. The government has to act. Marsha Blackburn responded, roll it.
David, I think that what it brings to mind is how we utilize the information that we have. And we all know, and I think that Bill would probably agree with this, neither he nor I are a climate scientist. He is an engineer and actor. I am a member of Congress. And what we have to do is look at the information that we get from climate scientists. As you said, there is not agreement around the fact of exactly what is causing this. Even the president's own Science and Technology Office head, Mr. Holdren, says no one single weather event is due specifically to climate change. So it drives the policy to look at cost-benefit analysis, what we do about it, and the impact that U.S. policy would have in a global environment.
Interesting. Cost-benefit analysis. It's very interesting to me. Because as I look at it, that seems like an adult conversation. She recognizes, incidentally, Bill Nye had first crack at the answer and talked about the fact that he says we need to do everything we can, and the United States needs to innovate and make and manufacture electricity that is ahead of the game when it comes to new technology and making things last longer. My point is, he goes to the idea of new technologies. You know where this is going. Bill Nye says the promise, we need to do this as a country, okay, not recognizing we're Americans as individuals and a whole host of things. What she is saying in response to David Gregory there is, hey, look, we've looked at it, and we can't take one weather event and say now this means this because there's too much data. We've got to examine the data from the scientists, come up with the conclusions that they have that they're certain of, and also the steps that we've got to take. We've got to look at the cost of the step versus the benefit. And when we look at the benefits, which she will detail on the flip side of the break, and Bill Nye has a very different point of view. You're going to hear that point of view. They're going to go back and forth, and I'm going to ask you, who wins the debate? I guess you kind of know that answer. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but you'll be listening on the flip side and finding out, and I look forward to that. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, AFR Talk.